Big night at the DNC last night. Joining the conversation, we have Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and associate editor of the Washington Post and MSNBC political analyst Eugene Robinson, politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University, politics editor at The Grio, and an MSNBC political contributor, Jason Johnson. Donny Deutsch is with us, and historian Jon Meacham. His new biography of John Lewis, entitled His Truth is Marching On, comes out next week. And you may have seen his remarks at the DNC last night.
This is a grave moment in America. A deadly virus is ravaging us. Our jobs are evaporating. Our faith in the things that bind us together is fraying, for our democracy is under assault from an incumbent more interested in himself than he is in the rest of us. Extremism, nativism, isolationism, and a lack of economic opportunity for working people are all preventing us from realizing our nation's promise. And so we must decide whether we will continue to be prisoners of the darkest of American forces, or will we free ourselves to write a brighter, better, nobler story. That's the issue of this election, a choice that goes straight to the nature of the soul of America.
Not since Reagan stood at the Brandenburg Gate have Americans been so stirred.
Actually, I thought he was amazing.
It was amazing. Jon Meacham. So I got to ask you this question that I know a lot of other people are asking. You obviously very close. You've been very close to the Bush family. Very close to Republicans throughout your life and Democrats throughout your life. That's quite a change for you. Yeah. You've not stepped out on the line politically in all the years that I've known you. And again, in fact, you've been more associated with the Bush family over the past 5-10 years than anybody else. Why did you do that last night? Why was it important for you to do that?
The choice is clear, right? As John Lewis taught us, if you see something, say something. And what we all see is what we all spend so much time talking about and thinking about, which is that the things that make the country worth defending, that make it worth the struggle toward a more perfect union, however flawed we are under assault. And as the Vice President said last night, democracy's on the ballot. It's a moment of great crisis, and crisis in Greek, remember, it comes from healthcare. Crisis was the moment in a disease when the patient lived or died. That's the origin of crisis coming into the vernacular. And so I've been friendly with Vice President Biden for a long time. He asked if I would do this, and my sense was, this is what I believe, and so I'm going to say it. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican either. I voted for both parties, and I just think that when the evidence of our own eyes is so compelling, which is that this president is disastrous for democracy with a lowercase d, we have an obligation to do what we can. And so I sat in my interactive dork office, as you saw there, and said what I thought. I want you to know Willie was crying. He sent me a FaceTime thing with the tears coming down. It was very touching.
It's very moving.
But the other thing, quickly, and Joe, you and I share this, I think. I was born too late to be genuinely tested by the great questions of the 20th century in terms of race. And so I was born 4 years after Selma, right? I like to think that if I'd been born in 1939 instead of 1969, that I would have been on the right side of that. But I don't know that. Right? We all like to tell ourselves that we would do the right thing in a moral, political, cultural moment of decision. But I don't know. So here we're in one, and at least I know what I'm doing now. and I feel completely at home with it. Final little thing, neither the vice president nor anyone associated with the campaign asked me to change a word. They didn't ask me to mention him. He said, you have a few minutes. I want you to define the soul of America. We're talking about it a lot. I want you to tell us what you think it is. And that was it.
Interesting.
Well, you know, it's interesting what you said about being from the South, being born late, too late to make those decisions. I think for many of us, the Southerners that were born late, I was born in '63. And we moved from Doraville, Georgia to Meridian, Mississippi in my first year. In school was the first year that Mississippi schools were integrated. So for me, integration was actually normal. And you are right. There was no opportunity to know how we all would have responded. And I would hope, like you, that I would have responded in an honorable way. And Willie, I think over the past 4 or 5 years, as Donald Trump's talked about Muslim bans, as Donald Trump's talked after Charlottesville about good people on both sides, as Donald Trump has done, especially over the past several months, done everything that he can do to gin up racial animus and conflict. I do think this election especially is a time for choosing, and a time for choosing without, without hyperbole. It's pretty straightforward, and we have two very distinct paths that we can go on coming out of this election, whether you love Joe Biden from the left or from the right or not.
Yeah, it pains me to pay John a sincere compliment, but I guess I have to do it here. It was a beautifully written, beautifully delivered speech last night. I had a friend text me and say, hey, you know John, right? I said, yeah. He said, do you think he would pre-record my eulogy? I would love to hear something about that delivered. So that might be a new enterprise for you, John.
I like it.
But Gene Robinson,
I like it.
I'm curious, Gene Robinson, about what you thought sitting listening to Joe Biden, because some people will say, well, there wasn't a lot of policy there, but that's not really what these speeches are about. It's exactly what John and Joe were just talking about. I think for a lot of people in this country, and a message that Joe Biden has tried to put out there over the last several months, is more of a visceral thing, which is, how do you feel about the country right now? How do you feel when you wake up and look at your phone? How do you feel about how divided we are right now? How do you feel about the most powerful person in the country waking up every day to divide the country? I can change that direction. I can take us to a new place. So, yes, he had some policy ideas. Yes, he wants to get people back to work. He talked about jobs. Yes, he had ideas about a national testing program. But bigger than that, particularly at a national convention like this, is how do you feel, and do you want to change the way you feel?
Well, that's exactly what the speech was about, I think. First, let me say to John Meacham, you were definitely ready for your close-up. Well done, John. That was striking and remarkable. You did it very well. The Biden speech, he sounded like a president. That's what he sounded like. The way we're used to having presidents sound. And so you can look at the political dimension of it, right? He demolishes the line of attack that they had been trying to, that Trump and the Republicans had been trying to take against him, that he's somehow doddering or senile or some far left, Antifa grandpa or something, whatever it is they're claiming. And then, no, he's Joe Biden. He's the same Joe Biden he's always been. But you heard the passion of a man who has given his life to public service, who cares deeply about this country, and who knows that we are, as Meacham said, at a moment of crisis, whether the patient lives or dies. And he's offering a way forward. He's offering a way to get past this ugly point in our history, and what his speech did was what the whole convention did over 4 nights, which was invite people in, invite people who are Republicans, once were Republicans, and invite from the entire political spectrum to come join him in the project of rebuilding the parts of our democracy that Donald Trump has been demolishing, and in getting past these overlapping crises that aren't getting better because the current president is incapable of making them better. So we'll get past the pandemic. We'll get past the economic crisis. We'll get past and hopefully to a better place on this discussion that we're having about systemic racism, and he was reassuring people. You know, we've done this sort of thing before. It can be done, but we have to take this first step, and we have to get past the election. And I thought it was a speech of Joe Biden's life, and you could feel the passion, and you could feel that this was his moment, and he delivered. I thought it was a spectacular speech.
And what's fascinating is that you actually did, as we said last hour, we had people from the left and the right who said that this was Joe Biden's the speech of Joe Biden's life, and he delivered well, knocked it out of the. Here's some of Joe Biden's speech talking about those crises that John Meacham mentioned.
No generation ever knows what history will ask of it. All we can ever know is whether we're ready when that moment arrives. And now history has delivered us to one of the most difficult moments America's ever faced. Four historic crises, all at the same time. A perfect storm, the worst pandemic in over 100 years, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, the most compelling call for racial justice since the 60s, and the undeniable realities and just the accelerating threats of climate change. So the question for us is simple. Are we ready? I believe we are. We must be.
So, Jason, I've already said it. I will look on this much more positively than I'm sure you. I thought thematically, it was a Reaganesque type of speech. You know, we Republicans always would make fun of Democratic speeches. The 1984 speech in San Francisco, where we'd talk about San Francisco Democrats, and it seemed like one soundbite to one special interest, another soundbite to another special interest. And it seemed like so many speakers in the Democratic Party would just, again, be going down a laundry list that they knew they had to check off. Last night's speech, I thought, soared, like a lot of conservatives did and a lot of Democrats did, soared because it was about themes. It was about broad, general themes that Donald Trump's Republican Party can't talk about anymore because they were optimistic themes. Biden, you could sum up Biden's speech by saying that he believes that America's greatest days truly do lie ahead, a Reagan line. And what a contrast between that and Donald Trump's continued vision of American carnage, and what a choice for voters.
Joe, I got to say that the buildup in the day's news, and John Meacham was actually a part of this, to Joe Biden was perfect. What a lot of America, and in particular white America, was facing heading up into Joe Biden's speech is, okay, we've been fooled again, right? Like all these people who gave this money to build a wall, people who have been caught up in the xenophobia and the fear of the Trump administration, they have been bamboozled again. Xenophobia and racism has fooled white America again. And then you get what John Meacham said, which is like, okay, this is, I don't know what I would have done 60 years ago, but I know the decision that I got to make now. Okay, what do I do? What do I do? And then Joe Biden comes in the end and says, I can take you there. Come with me and I'll get us there. I know it's hard. I know it's complicated. I know it's frustrating. I know these issues may not be what we thought we were going to have to face, but I'm the guy who can take us there. Take my hand. I'll grab you. I'll pull you. I'll take you, and I'll push you through. It was an absolutely amazing speech, and I think it captured what a lot of Americans are worried about today, in particular white Americans, and he showed that he's the guy who can take us forward in a way that includes everybody, not just certain groups of people.
Let's go to Donny Deutsch now, who looks like he just got off the yacht with Steve Bannon.
I mean, Donny.
And the Chinese billionaire.
You're doing this to trigger me.
So Donny, you're not allowed to talk about what a great speech this was. What I want you to instead talk to us about, because, again, you focused on what consumers want over your entire lifetime, and you've been through so many focus groups, and you've sold products. It seems to me that we have two distinct choices now, and it is a choice between optimism and somebody who sounds presidential, as Gene said, and yet another half of America who is pessimistic, who does buy into a resentment-fueled political argument, and who don't believe that America is moving in a positive direction. How does that contrast play out between, again, Joe Biden's Reaganesque themes and Donald Trump's American Carnage theme?
It's compassion versus fear. And by the way, next week, Trump is going to paint a picture of this country. You would think that there are flames burning everywhere. There are people with machetes running through the street. That's all they have left is fear on that side to hit that, which is a very, very powerful notion to hit. But what Biden was about last night was compassion. And boy, you know, I think people will buy compassion over fear most days of the week. When he talked about the 170,000 families and brought it back to his own family and his own loss, it wasn't a number all of a sudden. It was 170,000 actual families and how families had been destroyed. The compassion, I want to also go back a little bit before his speech, that little boy who had been overcoming stuttering, who Biden had worked with. You know, that's kind of just watching that little boy fight through and persevere is kind of anthemic to what you talk about, the soul of America. That little boy on display, fighting through, coming through adversity, all of us rooting for him is what this country is all about. And Donald Trump is the antithesis of that, rooting against. And I was just proud, watching Biden last night. And I think, Joe, your setup in terms of Stark, what does this country buy? At the end of the day, we're going to see who we are. And I believe we are more about that little boy fighting through, and we're all rooting together for him than rooting against. And if we're not, then we're in a lot of trouble. But I was really hopeful last night. If anybody didn't see that, please look that up, because that's who we are.
So moving.
That little boy, and that's what Joe Biden is fighting for.
Yeah. Caddy K, there's one thing I don't understand. Donald Trump continuing to talk about how bad America is, continuing to cling to American carnage, going into his convention talking about how America is filled with bloodshed in cities and chaos across the nation and a porous southern border. That would be about as effective, I would think, as me attacking Morning Joe and saying how terrible Morning Joe has gotten over the past 4 years, and it's the worst. I mean, he's responsible. It's Trump's country. Law and order doesn't work in 2020 like it did in '68 because Nixon wasn't the incumbent in '68. Trump is in 2020.
Right. That's the logical interpretation of when he slams these cities where there's problems and says there's carnage on the streets, right? Well, it's your problem because you've held it. But, Trump is talking to a very small group of the country, less than 30%, somewhere around 25 to 30%. And he feels the most important thing for him is to remind them of how terrible the situation is. And the implication is it's going to get so much worse if the Democrats take control. If the Democrats take control, you're going to have all of this terrible carnage. And his supporters see him as a total base play. It's what he's been doing for the last 4 years. It's, there is mayhem on the streets, and I am the only person that can fix it. I think that the one thing that Joe Biden can think that he took away from that speech is that he came across as eminently reasonable. I don't think there are very many people in the country left to persuade. Most people have made up their minds. All the opinion polls seem to show there's huge amount of enthusiasm on either side. But he gave to people who might be, don't know if I can be bothered, a roadmap out of this. I mean, as Donny was saying, you take your hand, he'll say, I'll show you how to get there. I have the plan on COVID. I have the plan on the economy. It's all reasonable. And for a country that is kind of suffering from PTSD, a little bit of reasonable planning. I mean, it's good to know there's a plan, right? Because at the moment, I just feel there's chaos over COVID. I sort of like the idea that there's a national plan.
Chaos.
And I think that could be appealing to people who may have been thinking, I don't know if I can be bothered to vote, because I'm not that inspired. Even if there's a roadmap out of this, please just give us something.
John Meacham, I think also for many Americans who aren't sure what they're going to do, Joe Biden promises a return to normalcy. And I wonder, in this age of economic crisis and this age of pandemic, where our lives, our culture, our economy is turned upside down, I wonder how powerful that message will prove to be in November, that return to normalcy. Okay, we wanted to shake things up in 2016. We wanted to bring in an outsider. A lot of Americans said that didn't work. Now, let's have a return to normalcy. I don't know how persuasive of a message has that been throughout history.
Well, the first use of it worked back 100 years ago. But can I revise and extend that a little bit? I think it's really, I think it's less normalcy, because normalcy wasn't all that great for everybody, right? It was pretty good if you look like me or look like you. But a normal America is not an America that is there for everyone and therefore true to the founding promise and bringing things to everybody. I think it's less a return to normalcy and more a reinvigoration of decency. He's just a decent guy, right? I mean, that's what we've seen for 4 nights and what everybody who's known him has seen forever. And, you know, he's not Franklin Roosevelt. He's not George Washington, but he's a decent, fair-minded man who wants the best parts of us to have a better chance against the worst parts of us, because the worst parts of us have been prevailing since 2016. And it's a constant struggle. It's a constant fight. One election is not going to fix this. Nothing in a fallen world is going to fix this forever. What is politics but the struggle for temporary dominion between conflicting interests? And right now, those two interests are hope versus fear, and light versus dark, and decency versus exclusion. And if the good parts of that can get temporary dominion through Joe Biden winning, then we have a better chance for a brighter period ahead. It's just about decency.
John Meacham, thank you so much. And still ahead on Morning Joe, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell rejects the president's claim that mail-in voting will lead to election fraud. We'll discuss that as the Postmaster General prepares to